A single mom helped an old man every day, until his grandson arrived with lawyers and a truth. The morning mist still clung to the pavement when Harper Quinn unlocked the glass doors of the Riverside Bus Terminal Cafe. The first buses hadn't arrived yet, only the hum of the vending machines and the faraway whistle from the river bridge cutting through the quiet. She tied her dark hair into a bun, buttoned her faded blue uniform, and switched on the espresso machine. Steam hissed, mingling with the faint scent of lemon cleaner and rain-soaked asphalt. Harper had worked this shift for nearly 3 years, since her husband left, and she had to rebuild her life piece by piece. Every morning started the same. She wiped the counters, arranged muffins in the glass case, and watched the clock tick toward 7:10 a.m. That was when the man in the gray wool coat would arrive. His name was Walter Finch, 81 years old, thin shoulders stooped beneath his scarf, his left hand always holding a leather-bound book and an old silver fountain pen. He never ordered from the menu. He only asked for herbal tea, no sugar, and sat at the same seat near the window. Seat 5. Sometimes he hummed softly as he wrote. Other times he just watched the buses glide in and out of the terminal as if they were pages turning in a story he'd read too many times. The first time Harper served him, he had tried to pay her in coins so old they barely had edges. She had smiled and said, "This one's on the house, Mr. Finch. You look like you've traveled far enough already." From that morning on, he came every day, and every day she set his cup down before he even reached the counter. At first, their exchanges were brief, small talk about the weather, the buses, or the crossword in the local paper. But slowly, she learned little pieces of him. He used to be an engineer, he said, who once helped design bridges across the state. He came here now to watch things keep moving even when I can't. She liked that line. It sounded like something from one of the books she used to love before her life got too busy for stories. Sometimes her son, Milo, joined her for a few minutes before school. The boy, 6 years old and endlessly curious, would sit beside the old man and ask questions about everything. How buses worked, why bridges didn't fall, what made rain smell like metal. Walter always answered as if the questions mattered deeply. "Bridges," he told Milo one morning, "aren't built just to cross rivers. They're built so people can find each other again." Harper had smiled quietly while wiping a counter, pretending not to listen, but something in that sentence landed softly in her chest. The regular passengers began to notice their trio. The quiet mom behind the counter, the old man with his tea, and the boy who asked too many questions. They didn't share much beyond those moments, yet each morning felt like a gentle promise that the day would begin with kindness. Harper didn't think of it as charity. She thought of it as routine, and routines were safe. But safety was rare in her world. The rent on her small apartment crept higher each month. Milo's asthma medicine wasn't covered by her part-time insurance, and still, she refused to complain. When her co-workers teased that she treated that old bus watcher like family, she just shrugged. "He reminds me to slow down," she'd say. "And he never forgets to say thank you." Some mornings, Walter would bring something small, a hand-folded paper crane, a wrapped piece of caramel, or a sketch of the bridge he'd once built decades ago. "I'm giving it a second life," he'd say, tapping his pen on the paper. Harper began leaving tiny thank you notes tucked beneath his saucer. "Hope the morning treats you kindly, Mr. Finch," or "Bridge looks sturdy today." It became their silent ritual, messages that didn't need to be spoken aloud. On colder days, she would heat the ceramic cup longer so his hands could warm against it. Once, she noticed his fingers trembling as he tried to write. so she quietly replaced the pen cap and said, "It's okay to rest, you know." He smiled, thin and knowing. "If I stop writing, I might forget why I'm still here." Harper didn't realize how much she needed those mornings until the day he didn't come, but that was later. For now, life at the terminal went on in its quiet rhythm. The hiss of the coffee machine, the flicker of bus lights outside, the voice over the loudspeaker announcing arrivals like chapters in someone else's story. To everyone else, Mr. Finch was just an old man who liked the smell of buses and tea. To Harper, he was a reminder that kindness could exist without reason, that some people entered your life not to change it immediately, but to steady it. Like pillars under a bridge, you didn't even realize was trembling. And every morning, as the clock neared 7:10 and she reached for the kettle, Harper found herself whispering the same thought. Please let him come today. Seat 5 feels empty without him. The next morning began wrong in a way Harper couldn't name. The cafe felt colder, though the heater hummed at its usual setting. Rain tapped against the wide glass panes, and her reflection looked tired. The kind of tired that didn't come from sleep, but from silence. At 7:10, her eyes flicked toward seat 5 out of habit. Empty. She still poured the tea, herbal, no sugar, and set it gently on the table, steam curling upward like a promise waiting to be kept. By 7:30, the cup had gone lukewarm. By 8, it was cold. Harper wiped the counter and told herself he was probably late, maybe at a doctor's appointment, maybe resting his legs after the storm. But when the next day came, and the next, the seat stayed empty. The quiet in that corner grew heavier until it began to feel like something missing from her own home. On the 4th morning, as she was cleaning under the benches, she noticed something caught between the seat cushion and the wall. A small leather notebook with its elastic band stretched thin and a cream-colored envelope tucked beneath it. Her name, written in delicate, wavering handwriting. For H. Quinn. She froze. It was his handwriting. She had seen it on the napkin sketches, on the paper cranes, on the little notes he'd leave by the tip jar. The envelope smelled faintly of tea and cedar, the same scent that always lingered when he left. Her hands trembled slightly as she opened it. Inside was a short letter. Dear Harper, if you are reading this, then my mornings have already slowed down more than I intended. Thank you for giving them meaning while they lasted. You made me remember that kindness isn't a lost art. It just needs a witness. I have left a few things in the right hands, I hope. One of them is a small key, taped under this note. It belongs to a house that holds more stories than I could ever finish writing. Perhaps you'll keep it from going quiet. Below the signature, Walter Finch, a tiny brass key was taped to the bottom of the page. Harper stared at it for a long time, her heart thudding unevenly. A key? To what? She flipped through the notebook and found pages filled with sketches of bridges, lists of numbers, fragments of letters never sent. One page caught her breath. Seat 5, 7:12 a.m. Harper Quinn, the woman who remembers everyone's drink but her own. She pressed the cover shut before tears could spill. That evening, after closing, she couldn't shake the image of that empty chair. The buses outside hissed and sighed, headlights blurring through the drizzle. She walked to the terminal exit where the night air smelled of wet pavement and exhaust. For a moment, she thought of throwing the key into the trash bin. Whatever it opened wasn't hers. But something in the line, "Keep it from going quiet," pulled her back. The next day, on her lunch break, she took a taxi to the only address she remembered hearing from him. Riverview Home, the senior facility he once joked about. The nurse at the front desk frowned sympathetically. "Mr. Finch was transferred last week," she said. "His condition required long-term care. His grandson handled everything." Harper nodded, thanked her, and walked back into the rain. She didn't know why disappointment stung so deeply. She had no right to feel abandoned. He wasn't family, not really. But the bus terminal felt smaller without him, as if the sound of wheels and chatter had lost its rhythm. That night, after putting Milo to bed, she sat at the small kitchen table and reread the letter under the yellow light. The brass key glinted faintly. Her son wandered out half asleep, rubbing his eyes. "Mom, you're still up?" She smiled softly and touched his hair. "Just reading something important." He squinted at the key in her hand. "Is it for treasure?" he asked. Harper almost laughed. "Maybe it's for a story that isn't finished yet." The next morning, she tucked the key into her apron pocket before heading to work. The cafe looked the same. Same hum, same chatter. But she noticed how sunlight no longer reached seat 5 the way it used to. The shadows stayed longer, as if waiting for him to return. She kept glancing at the door, expecting the familiar gray coat to appear, the soft tap of his cane, his nod of gratitude. Nothing. When she locked up that night, she paused by the table and whispered, "If you don't come back, who will finish the story?" Outside, the rain started again, steady and quiet. She looked down at the brass key, feeling the chill of metal against her palm. It was too small to mean much, yet it carried weight, as if it belonged to something larger than a house. Maybe to a part of her life she hadn't dared to unlock. She didn't know it yet, but that key would soon lead her to a truth she wasn't ready to face, and to a man who would arrive not with stories, but with lawyers and questions that would change everything. The rain had barely stopped when Harper unlocked the cafe the next morning. She was restocking the pastry case, still half thinking about the brass key and Mr. Finch's letter, when the bell above the door chimed. It wasn't the usual soft jingle of commuters. It was sharp, deliberate, followed by the echo of dress shoes on tile. 3 men stood at the entrance. The first, a tall man in a gray wool coat, dark hair damp from rain, looked around as if trying to recognize something he had only heard described. The 2 behind him carried black briefcases. Harper froze mid-motion, napkin in hand. The man stepped forward. "Are you Harper Quinn?" His tone was formal, but not unkind. "Yes," she said slowly. "I'm Caleb Finch," he replied. "Walter Finch was my grandfather." The name landed like a gust of wind that took the air from the room. Her hand tightened on the counter. "Your grandfather was?" Caleb hesitated, lowering his gaze. "He passed away 2 nights ago." The sound of the espresso machine hissed behind her, too loud for the silence that followed. Before she could respond, one of the men opened his case and produced a cream-colored folder sealed with a notary's stamp. "Mr. Finch prepared a supplementary document to his will 3 months ago," Caleb explained. "It includes a handwritten letter naming you as the designated recipient of his property at 17 Bridge Street. He described you as the woman who kept my mornings alive." Harper blinked, her mind a blur of disbelief. "That can't be right. I served him tea." "He was very clear," Caleb said quietly. "The letter you found was meant to lead us here. You were supposed to receive formal notice today." He slid the folder toward her on the counter. Inside was a copy of the deed, the same address written in Mr. Finch's careful handwriting, and a notarized statement with her full name, her workplace, and even the words Seat 5, Riverside Terminal. Harper felt her knees weaken. She looked up at Caleb, who was watching her with a mixture of duty and something gentler, almost uncertain. "I don't understand why," she whispered. "He barely knew me." Caleb shook his head. "He knew enough. He told me about a woman who remembered his stories when no one else wanted to hear them." For a long moment, neither spoke. The lawyers stepped back, giving them distance. The hum of the cafe filled the space between their words. The drip of coffee, the squeak of a chair leg, the wind against the windows. Caleb glanced toward seat 5. "He sat here every day?" Harper nodded. 7:10 sharp. He exhaled softly. "He wasn't one for routine at home. I didn't think anything could hold his attention anymore." His voice cracked faintly on the last word. They arranged to meet that afternoon at the property. Harper almost didn't go. The whole thing felt impossible, like being cast in a story she hadn't auditioned for. But by evening, she found herself standing beside the small 2-story house on Bridge Street. The paint was peeling, the windows shuttered, but the lights worked when Caleb turned the key. The air inside smelled faintly of cedar and old books, just like the letter. Dust hung like memory in the golden light from the front window. On a small table sat a framed photo of Walter, much younger, holding blueprints of a bridge. Caleb walked slowly through the living room, tracing his fingers along the mantel. "I grew up here," he said softly. "My parents fought in this room the night my dad left. Grandpa stopped talking about this place after that." He looked back at Harper. "He used to design bridges, the Riverside one too. When it collapsed during a renovation 30 years ago, he took the blame, even though it wasn't his fault. My father never forgave him." Harper glanced at the shelves, stacks of ledgers, sketches, engineering notes, and a small wooden box labeled Project R. Inside lay a single photograph, the Riverside Bridge, half-built, sunlight glittering on the water. "He kept everything," she murmured. "Even the parts no one asked him to remember." Caleb nodded. That was him, building even when no one noticed. When they stepped outside, the sky had cleared. Caleb handed her a smaller envelope sealed with wax. "This was attached to the will," he said. She opened it carefully. Inside, written in Mr. Finch's faint hand, "Harper, bridges aren't made of steel alone. Sometimes they're made of people. You reminded me of that. Take care of what still stands." Harper closed the letter and swallowed the lump rising in her throat. "He left this house to me," she said quietly, "but it feels like it still belongs to him." Caleb smiled faintly. "Then maybe keeping it alive is the point." He looked down at his watch. "The lawyers will finalize the transfer next week. I just wanted to be here first, to see the place through his eyes." As he turned to leave, Harper noticed a single object still on the porch table, a silver pen with faint scratches along its body, the same one Mr. Finch used to write at seat 5. She held it carefully, feeling the weight of memory settle into her palm. The streetlights flickered on, casting long shadows across the old bridge in the distance. For the first time in weeks, she felt both loss and something new, like standing on one end of a bridge whose other side she had yet to see. The next few days passed in a quiet haze. Between shifts at the cafe and helping Milo with his schoolwork, Harper barely had time to think. Yet every time she reached into her apron for change, her fingers brushed the brass key. It felt heavier now, knowing what it opened. On Saturday morning, she finally gathered the courage to return to 17 Bridge Street. The sun was thin, filtered through bare branches, and the house looked softer in daylight, less like an inheritance and more like a question waiting to be answered. Caleb was already there, sleeves rolled, standing by the porch railing with a small toolbox. He glanced up when she approached. "I wasn't sure you'd come," he said. "I wasn't sure either," she admitted, holding up a grocery bag. "I brought coffee and cinnamon rolls. Thought the place could use a little warmth." His smile was small but real. "That's probably what my grandfather liked about you." Inside, dust motes drifted through the light. The floor creaked under their steps. The house smelled faintly of cedar and thyme. Caleb had already cleared some space in the front room, revealing a drafting table covered in rolled blueprints and brittle sheets of graph paper. "He never threw anything away," he said, tapping one corner gently. "Every bridge, every note, every mistake. He kept them all." Harper ran her fingers over the pencil marks, noticing the precise handwriting, the careful geometry. "He told me once," she said softly, "that building something strong isn't just about math. It's about knowing what people need to cross." Caleb looked up at her then, his expression unreadable. "You really listened to him." "He was worth listening to," she replied. A quiet filled the room, not awkward, just full. In the back corner, a narrow door led to a study lined with shelves. The books were arranged not by title or subject but by color, creating a strange patchwork of faded spines. On the desk sat a small wooden box labeled Project R. Harper opened it carefully. Inside were photographs of the old Riverside Bridge, clippings from newspapers, and folded engineering notes dated decades earlier. One clipping headline made her pause. "Engineer blamed for structural collapse, one dead." Beneath it, a handwritten line in Mr. Finch's script, "Truth buried deeper than the water." Caleb leaned over her shoulder. "That's the year he quit," he said quietly. "He never talked about it. My father used to say he walked away in shame. But this," he gestured to the box, "this looks more like proof he was still trying to clear his name." Harper turned the page over and found a list of maintenance discrepancies, dates, initials, and supplier notes. "These are reports," she said, eyes widening. "He documented everything. Someone falsified the safety tests." Caleb nodded slowly, the weight of it dawning on him. He must have known, but without someone to back him up, no one would have listened. They spent the rest of the afternoon sorting through the papers, stacking them into piles. The light shifted from gold to gray as clouds gathered outside. When Harper brushed the dust from a framed photo on the mantel, she saw Walter Younger, standing beside a bridge model, his arm around a boy, Caleb, maybe 7 years old. "He kept this," she murmured. Caleb swallowed. "I didn't know he still had that photo." He hesitated before adding, "My father stopped visiting after the accident. I guess we all did." When the storm broke, rain pattered softly against the windows. Harper lit the old desk lamp. Its warm glow spread across the blueprints, making them look alive again. Caleb stood by the window, his reflection fractured in the glass. "It's strange," he said. "Spending my life building structures to last forever, and realizing the one thing that could have saved him was something invisible. Trust." Harper looked at him, then at the plans on the table. "Maybe this is how you rebuild it," she said. He nodded slowly, as if understanding. Together they carried the box of documents into the front room and set it beside the envelope from the will. "These should go to someone who can do something with them," Harper said. "If this proves he wasn't at fault, it could clear his name," Caleb finished, "and maybe give him peace." Outside, the rain eased into a drizzle. Harper closed the door and turned to find Caleb studying her. "You didn't have to help," he said. "This isn't your burden." She shook her head. "He trusted me with it. That makes it my bridge, too." Later, as they stood on the porch, she looked out toward the distant shimmer of the river. The water moved steadily beneath the gray sky, carrying the reflection of the half-ruined bridge. She could almost hear Mr. Finch's voice again. Bridges aren't built to last forever. They're built so people can find each other again. And that night, as Harper locked up the house and slipped the key back into her pocket, she realized it wasn't just the house she was meant to keep alive. It was the truth it carried. By the following week, the story had slipped beyond Harper's control. It began with a single post on a local news site. Cafe worker inherits engineer's estate amid bridge scandal, and spread like spilled ink. Photos of the old house, the deed transfer, even a grainy shot of Harper locking the cafe appeared online. At first, she tried to ignore it, but by Wednesday, 2 reporters had come to the Riverside terminal asking questions. Her co-workers whispered, customers stared, and the words inheritance, controversy, and sympathy case followed her like shadows. She wanted to hide, but life didn't stop for embarrassment. She still had bills, and Milo still needed his asthma medication. When she arrived at work Thursday morning, she found a folded newspaper on the counter with a handwritten note in Caleb's familiar, neat script. "Don't panic. Meet me at Bridge Street tonight. We need to talk." She almost didn't go, but curiosity and something heavier, responsibility, pushed her through the rain again. When she reached the house, Caleb was on the porch, his hair damp, papers spread across the table beneath a lantern. "The files your grandfather kept," she said, recognizing the documents. "They're the reason this started, aren't they?" He nodded grimly. "Someone must have leaked that we're reviewing his old blueprints. The contractor who handled the renovation 30 years ago. He's still alive. His firm's lawyers reached out this morning. They want the documents suppressed." Harper stared at him. "Suppressed? You mean hidden again?" Caleb's jaw tightened. "Yes. They're offering money to keep it quiet." She crossed her arms. "You're not considering it, are you?" His silence was answer enough. "Caleb, this isn't about money. It's about his name, your family's name." He looked away. "And yours now, apparently. You're the woman everyone thinks manipulated an old man into signing over property." The words hit like a slap, but his tone wasn't cruel, just tired. "I know that's not true," he added quickly, "but the media doesn't. If this turns into a lawsuit, your job, your son, it could all get messy." Harper stepped closer, her voice steady. "I already live messy, but your grandfather spent decades carrying a lie. You want to let him go down with it again?" Caleb exhaled, shoulders sinking. "You sound like him," he murmured. She blinked. "That's not an insult," he said softly. "He used to tell me, between being right and being kind, choose kind. But sometimes, kindness means telling the truth anyway." He gathered the papers and set them in a weatherproof folder. "We'll take them to the city records office tomorrow. I'll file the motion to reopen his case." Lightning flickered across the river, and thunder rolled like distant machinery. Harper looked at the faint outline of the half-collapsed Riverside Bridge through the rain. "He tried to fix something that broke before anyone cared," she said. "Now we have to finish it." Caleb nodded, then hesitated. "You don't have to be part of this. You've done enough." She shook her head. "If I stop now, it's like pretending those mornings at Seat 5 never happened." They worked through the night, scanning and organizing the files. At dawn, as rain turned to mist, Caleb brewed coffee in an old tin pot he found in the kitchen. He poured her a cup and said quietly, "When this goes public, they'll come after you harder. Are you sure you're ready?" She met his eyes. "I wasn't ready for single motherhood either. But here we are." Something in his expression softened, and for a moment, neither spoke. By noon, they delivered the files to the courthouse. The clerk recognized the Finch name instantly. "Reopening a 30-year case?" she asked, eyebrows raised. Caleb replied evenly, "Revisiting a mistake that's overdue." The next day, a short notice appeared in the paper. "City to re-examine bridge failure case after new evidence emerges." That evening, Harper returned to the cafe. A few customers offered quiet nods of support. Others avoided her. When she looked toward seat 5, the sunlight caught the rim of the cup she'd placed there, as if the space itself was listening. Later that night, as she closed up, she found Caleb waiting outside, holding a file in his hand. "We did it," he said. "The court accepted the submission. They're assigning an independent engineer to verify the documents." Harper smiled faintly. "Then the truth has a chance." "It does," he said, and after a pause added, "Thanks to you." She turned the cafe sign to closed and looked out toward the rain-slicked street. "Not to me," she said quietly. "To the man who built bridges so we could learn how to cross them." Caleb followed her gaze, his voice barely above the hum of the rain. "And maybe to the woman who refused to let them fall again." Inside, the clock struck 7:10, the hour an old man once walked in for tea, and the sound felt like a heartbeat returning to the room. Weeks passed, and the storm of headlines slowly began to fade, replaced by something unexpected: curiosity. The city's engineering board confirmed what Walter Finch had suspected all along. The collapse had not been his fault. Old maintenance logs and inspection reports, validated against the documents Harper and Caleb had submitted, revealed decades of negligence by the original contractor. The news spread quietly but steadily, and when Harper saw the article, "Engineer cleared posthumously, City apologizes for error," she couldn't hold back tears. She stood by seat 5, the morning light painting soft gold across the countertop, and whispered, "You did it, Mr. Finch." They finally listened. Caleb appeared later that day, holding 2 cups of coffee instead of 1. "They're reopening the Riverside Bridge," he said, smiling in disbelief. "Not just to repair it, to rebuild it. And they want to include something new. A public reading room beneath the bridge, a place for the community. They want to call it the Bridge of Stories." Harper blinked. "That's beautiful." "You're part of the proposal," he added. "They need someone to manage the community side, organize programs, reading events, family workshops. I told them about the way you run this cafe, how you make people feel seen." She hesitated. "Caleb, I don't know anything about projects like that." "You know about people," he said simply. "That's what this place needs." A month later, Harper found herself wearing a hard hat, standing beside Caleb and a group of city workers at the riverbank. Milo tugged at her sleeve, pointing toward the cranes lifting beams into place. "Is this Grandpa Walter's bridge?" he asked. Harper smiled softly. "It's everyone's now." The wind carried the scent of steel, wet earth, and coffee from a nearby vendor. She watched as the first arch of the new structure was hoisted into the air, sleek, modern, but anchored in the same foundations Walter had designed decades ago. For a moment, it felt as if he was standing there too, nodding quietly, proud. During lunch breaks, Harper helped plan the reading room. The design sketches pinned to the site trailer showed wooden shelves, warm lighting, and a long communal table etched with the words, "Kindness builds stronger bridges than steel." Milo drew a picture of a bridge with smiling stick figures and taped it beside the plans. Caleb saw it and laughed. "He's our youngest consultant," he said, ruffling Milo's hair. Over the weeks, Harper noticed the change in Caleb. The tension he once carried had softened. He still worked with precision, still measured twice before speaking, but there was warmth in his pauses now. One afternoon, while they reviewed the layout for the reading area, he found a small metal plate among his grandfather's old belongings. It was scratched but legible. Not broken, just unfinished. "That phrase kept him going," Caleb said quietly. "He told me that when I was 10. I didn't understand it until now." Harper traced the letters with her thumb. "Maybe that's what families are," she said. "Not broken, just waiting to be finished the right way." He looked at her then, and for a fleeting moment, it felt as though the bridge wasn't the only thing being rebuilt. By early spring, the project was nearly complete. The town prepared for a dedication ceremony, and Harper helped organize volunteers, inviting local children to bring their favorite books for the opening. She even found herself writing again, short reflections about the mornings with Mr. Finch, the smell of tea and cedar, the quiet lessons hidden in routine. Caleb read one draft and said, "You should read that aloud at the ceremony." She shook her head, laughing. "I write better than I speak." "Maybe," he replied, "but people should hear it from the person who kept the story alive." On the eve of the reopening, Harper walked to the bridge after sunset. The lights shimmered on the water, the new structure gleaming like a thread of silver across the dark. She stood there for a long while, remembering the day she first met Mr. Finch, the way he had smiled over a steaming cup of tea. "You kept your promise," she whispered to the wind. "Now it's my turn." The reflection of the bridge rippled, as if answering back. When she turned to leave, Caleb was waiting near the railing. He handed her a small package wrapped in brown paper. "A late thank you," he said. Inside was Walter's old silver pen, newly polished. Engraved on the side were 3 initials, WFH, for Walter Finch and Harper. "I thought it should belong to both of you," Caleb said. Harper's throat tightened. "You're sure?" "He'd want you to have it," Caleb said softly. "You finished what he started." She held the pen under the lamplight, watching the engraving catch the glow. "Then we both have something to keep building," she said. Caleb nodded, his smile quiet but full. The river murmured beneath them, steady and sure. Above it, the bridge stretched from one bank to the other, strong, bright, and whole again. The morning of the grand reopening dawned clear and golden, as if the whole town had been washed clean overnight. From the cafe window, Harper could see the crowd gathering near the river, the hum of conversation, the shimmer of ribbons fluttering across the railings of the newly rebuilt Riverside Bridge. She took one last look around the place that had started everything, the hum of the espresso machine, seat 5 perfectly set with a cup of tea, the silver pen resting beside it. "You'd like this day, Mr. Finch," she whispered, locking the door and stepping into the sunlight. Down by the riverbank, the stage was decorated with white flowers and sketches of the old bridge displayed beside the new blueprints. Milo clutched her hand, eyes wide with excitement. "Mom, are we going to meet the mayor?" he whispered. She laughed softly. "Maybe. But remember what matters most. Today isn't about speeches. It's about stories. Caleb stood near the front of the crowd, his suit pressed but his posture relaxed. When he saw them approaching, his face brightened in a way Harper wasn't used to seeing, open, unguarded. "You made it," he said. "Wouldn't miss it," she replied. He handed her a folded sheet of paper. "Your speech," he reminded her gently. She shook her head, but Milo nudged her. "You wrote it," he said. "You have to read it." The boy's confidence left her no choice. As the ceremony began, the mayor spoke first, recounting the history of the old bridge, the tragedy, and the rediscovery of the truth. "We owe gratitude to those who refused to let a good man's legacy fade," he said, gesturing toward Harper and Caleb. Then came her turn. The microphone felt heavy in her hand. For a moment she couldn't find her voice. The wind lifted a strand of her hair, and the river below whispered its steady rhythm. Finally she spoke. "I'm not an engineer," she began. "I serve coffee, I sweep floors. But an old man once told me that bridges aren't just made of steel. They're made of people, of every small act of kindness that keeps someone from giving up. I think that's what Mr. Walter Finch was building all along." The crowd quieted. A few heads bowed. This bridge stands because truth mattered to him, and because kindness found a way to finish what time could not. When she stepped back, applause rippled through the crowd. Caleb met her eyes, and in his, she saw something steady, gratitude, respect, and the beginning of something she didn't dare name yet. The ribbon was cut, cameras flashed, and the crowd poured across the bridge. Beneath it, the entrance to the Bridge of Stories reading room opened for the first time. Sunlight spilled across polished wood tables, shelves lined with donated books, and a wall-sized mural of the old bridge, painted in sepia tones. Above it, in neat letters, the inscription read, "Not broken, just unfinished." Milo ran ahead, dragging Harper inside. "Look, Mom," he said, pointing to a display case near the window. Inside was a photograph of Walter Finch holding his blueprints, beside another of the rebuilt bridge glowing in dawn light. Between them sat a small card with Harper's handwriting. "For the man who reminded us that some bridges are worth rebuilding twice." Harper stood silently, her throat tight. Caleb joined her, slipping a quiet program into her hand. On the cover were the same words she had spoken that morning. "They're printing them for visitors," he said. "Your words belong here." She smiled, a tear sliding down her cheek. No, they belonged to him. Later that afternoon, as the crowd thinned, she found herself back on the bridge, leaning against the railing. The water below glittered like moving glass. Caleb joined her, holding 2 paper cups of coffee. "You didn't freeze," he teased. "Barely," she admitted, smiling. They stood side by side, watching the reflection of the new bridge shimmer on the river. "You know," he said quietly, "he'd be proud of you." She turned to look at him. "Of us, maybe," she said. "You finished what he started." Caleb looked down, then nodded. "Maybe we both did." Just then, Milo ran up, waving something in his hand, a small metal plaque. "They said I could put this where I want," he said, out of breath. Harper crouched down. The words etched into the plaque made her heart swell. "Home begins with the person who opens the door first." Together, the 3 of them placed it near the entrance of the reading room. Caleb brushed the dust from his hands, then looked at Harper. "He'd like that," he said. "He'd like this." As the sun began to dip behind the hills, the bridge lights flickered on, one by one, reflecting across the water like a trail of stars. Harper felt Milo's hand slip into hers and Caleb's quiet presence beside her. For the first time in years, she didn't feel like she was standing on one side of life, looking toward something she couldn't reach. She was already there, on solid ground, surrounded by people who had learned, just like her, that kindness could build what grief once tore down. She looked toward the horizon and whispered, "Thank you, Mr. Finch." Then, smiling at the boy beside her, she added, "Ready to start the next story, kiddo?" Milo nodded eagerly, and together they walked across the bridge, their shadows stretching long and certain in the fading light. And as the screen of the story would fade out, the narrator's voice might echo what Harper had learned. Sometimes, the smallest acts of care build the strongest bridges, and when one story ends, another quietly begins. If this story touched your heart, even just a little, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Midus Stories, where every act of kindness becomes the bridge to another new beginning.